Well, welcome back, folks. This is part 2 of the series on reconditioning and or restoring the wiring harness or loom for the Suzuki TS50 Gaucho project. Part 1, it was more of an introduction as to the project itself. This is part 2 where I'm going to share with you some of the work that I've completed over the recent days. In the shot right now is the main wiring harness or loom for the project bike. And as I indicated, I believe in the first part of this series, I was not intending to do a complete restore, that is, take it all apart, because I didn't need to. It actually, fundamentally, was in very good condition. What I did was clean it. The boots, these 3 rubber boots, or vinyl, whatever they are, I think they're probably a vinyl, I cleaned. I used this product, which I've used for years. In fact, this is a 1 gallon, almost 4 liter container. It's called Automagic. I don't even know if it's used or made anymore. It's an automotive reconditioning product that's really, I think, intended for professional use, but I bought this probably 20 years ago and I'm still working off this container. It's probably half full. But this is a silicone-based product, and that's what I use to clean and recondition these vinyl boots that you can see here. So I just cleaned them with that product I just shared with you. The connectors themselves, I just cleaned. I use contact cleaner, plastic safe contact cleaner, and this little brush right here with the blue tape on it. That's about the perfect size to get down into these bullet connectors like that, clean them out. And with the contact cleaner, I just flushed them out really good and came out really clean. I did wipe down as best I could the wiring itself with acetone just to make sure that was clean and there's no grunge or grease or oil on them, and got them all cleaned up. The other thing that I did, I think I shared with you, I was intending to do, is repair this orange wire right here. This part of the wiring harness goes to the horn. And if you recall, I think I talked about the fact this had been spliced. Let me get some pieces here together. It had been spliced with this piece right here somewhere in the past. You can see someone used this bullet connector. They did a very nice job of it. This had been something like that. They'd done a very nice job of it, and it was all properly sealed up with heat shrink tubing, but I did want to replace it with orange wiring. I didn't have much orange wiring. This is actually the only piece I had. I had one piece out of all the wiring I've got from my various projects. Orange apparently isn't used very often because this is all I had. It was the right size. So I just took a short piece of this orange wire and spliced it into the original orange wiring, put a new butt splice, female butt splice, or female connector rather, on the end. And then used heat shrink tubing, as you can see, I think there. And I'll put a couple of pictures up here next you can see what this looked like when I opened it up, because I didn't do a video of the actual repair. You've seen me do that before, but here's a couple of pictures of this this piece when I opened it up originally. These other parts here came from this section right here that goes to the battery. We also, I think, talked about that briefly. And I ordered a new one of these. I'm expecting it any time. I do not have it yet. As well as this fuse. This is the original fuse, which was actually okay. There was, well, this is one of the original fuses in this little plastic. It's a spare fuse. It was in here. And I did test it, and it's actually okay. I'm just going to hang on to that, but this is all going to be replaced. I'm about complete now with this harness, or this loom, so this can go back on the bike. There's an earth or ground, you can see there. Like I said, I cleaned up really well. I did do a little rewrapping here of this section where I had to splice in that new orange wire and that new connector. So I just wrapped it from here to about here or so, about where my thumb is. It's been rewrapped just to hold those wires together and make that a nice, neat, clean assembly, because I have this original style wrap in my inventory. Other than replacing of this one connector right here, this female, I didn't replace any of the other connectors like I originally thought I might. A few of them are a little bit hard maybe, the vinyl, but not bad. Some of them are actually quite soft. Like these two right here are really soft and pliable. So I think it's very serviceable even for a restoration. Clean this terminal block as well. I did test all the wiring, by the way, with an ohm meter to make sure I have good connections on everything. I thought I would because everything worked previous, and everything is working the way I would expect. So this now, as far as I'm concerned, can go on the bike. We talk a bit about the wiring that goes to the controls from the handlebars. This is the right side actually. It goes like this. And this is the brake switch you can see right here. Someone has done repairs to this loom before. You can see right here some heat shrink here and here. And if I look down in there, I can see a butt splice. So someone has been in here doing repairs. I don't recall whether this wiring works or not completely. So I am going to have to take it all apart anyway because I'm going to polish these control mounts right here. I'll take this all apart, and this is your turn signal switch. It actually isn't used on this bike, but I will take this all apart anyway so that I can clean it and tumble polish it. Obviously I'm going to re-sleeve all of this with new vinyl sleeve because this is all cracked anyway, and I will have to test and check the wiring, and I will probably end up doing something different than what they did here in terms of these repairs. Probably functional, but I don't like the look of them. And again, I'm always stymied by the amount of damaged wiring I find on these bikes. Even a very nice bike like this was to begin with, how all this wiring gets damaged, gets pinched, and has to be repaired. I've been working on motorcycles since the early 70s, and I don't think I've ever had on a bike that well, my F6 for instance, there's not one pinched wire on that bike, and I bought it new in 1973. There's not one pinched wire. There's cracked vinyl, but there are no wires that have ever been damaged on that bike, and I rode the wheels off of that bike when I was a kid. So how this happens, again, I don't understand it, but it's very common. Excuse the rant there for a few minutes. This is the clutch side. I think this is a high-low beam here, I believe, and the horn button right there, and the enrichener for the start system or start circuit right here. Again, I'll take this all apart. I will tumble and polish and tumble these pieces. These levers, at least this one's going to have to be replaced because it's been damaged, as you can see, and all distorted. Easy to get these levers, so I will replace this and probably this one while I'm at it, only because it's a little worse for wear. I'm not going to do the work on these components right now. I'll probably come back to that a bit later, probably quite a bit later, because I don't worry about the handlebars right away anyway. They're one of the later things that goes on the bike. So I'll come back to these pieces at another time down the road a bit. I'm not going to do that now because I want to get on with the wiring loom mounted on the bike, the main loom, and get on with some of the assembly of the frame itself. So I'll come back to these pieces later, but I did want to share with you what they look like right now. We talked briefly about this taillight before, but I did want to review a couple things with you. Most of this isn't salvageable. That is, to reiterate, the lens needs to be replaced, the reflector needs to be replaced, and this piece, this back plate, has been reworked. And one of the things I mentioned in, I think, the previous video, I was confused about this having been reworked without any apparent damage to the mount itself. Well, there is actually damage, or has been damage, and you can see right here and right here, someone has brazed it. I can tell it's brazed by the color on the back side right there. You can see it's been brazed. They did a good job of it, by the way. I don't know who did it, but they did a pretty good job of brazing. A very good job, actually. They just didn't grind it back smooth. So this does show evidence of damage. Now, remember, this this back plate mounts something like that, and this is all wrinkled here, so I don't know whether, you know, it got dropped and somehow or other distorted this and twisted it and bent it and created a crack. I don't know. My thinking though is that I'm going to carefully grind this braze back, probably with a Dremel on both sides, and see what the repair underneath looks like. It mounted okay to the fender, I'm pretty sure of that. So in terms of alignment and fit, I think it's okay. I will double check that. But I want to see if this looks like underneath here. And if it's okay, the repair, then I'm going to go ahead and obviously I'll take the reflectors off, and I will have to powder coat this to match the rest of the silver that I've already powder coated somewhere down the road in the future. I don't know if I can save these reflectors. Maybe. This one's got some scarring on it. This one's in pretty good shape, and I think those are still available from Suzuki. But this, I have to determine what I'm going to do next here, where it was brazed. The rest of these pieces are going to be replaced, and let me show you what replacement looks like. And here is the replacement. This is an aftermarket replacement piece that you can buy them all over the place. I found they're on eBay. They're very common. It's not terribly expensive. The reflector is a virtual dead match for the OEM, with the exception of this labeling or nomenclature where it says Stanley, SAE, some numbers, and etc., DOT or Department of Transportation, SAE. That nomenclature or labeling is not on this lens. But other than that, it's a very close match. Let me get the original back here. You can see, I think, right there. There is one significant difference, though, and that is the spacing between these mounting holes I'm pointing to on the new piece, right here, left and right thumbs, is different than on this piece. And I knew that going in because they called that out on the listing. I got this off of eBay. The spacing on the replacement piece right here is a little wider. You probably won't be able to see this. I won't be able to either. This is actually a little wider, if I remember, by 10 millimeters than this one. So what I have to do, no, I take that back, I got it reversed. This original hole spacing is wider by 10 millimeters than the original. So I am going to have to do something or come up with a solution to that, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. I took the lens off of this back plate, and by the way, there's a couple other differences, minor differences between these pieces. One is the original had this protrusion you can see right here that the aftermarket doesn't. This one simply just has a hole that it poked the wiring through, and I'm going to end up, I think, probably installing a grommet or figuring out a way to maybe slide some heat shrink tubing down over this wiring. I don't like that wiring just being loose like that, going through that hole. Even though it's been, the edges have been softened by whoever made this, they did an okay job of that, but I still am going to, I think, protect these wires with either a grommet or some heat shrink tubing or something similar to that anyway. Also, this piece, the new piece, does not have the reflector that the original does. As you can see here, what they did instead, as a workaround, they put a little bit brighter finish on the inside here versus the original, which used, again, that reflector. Could I adopt this to this? Maybe, but why would I? Because this one's been repainted anyway, as we talked about previous. So there are a couple of differences here. Let me take this bulb out. I did check the bulb and the wiring with a 6-volt battery, and it does work. It depends on a good contact between the metal plate and the frame of the bike for an earth or a ground, which I don't like, so I might do something different about that. But the original did too, so it must have worked at the time. Anyway, back to this piece. What I'm going to have to do to make this piece work with the original taillight mount here is I'm going to have to move these holes out about 5 millimeters on each side to make up that 10 millimeter to center this on the taillight To do that, there's a couple of ways I could go about it. One is I could, of course, put it in my mill. I'd have to fixture it and locate the center of the hole, and then move over, approximately 5 millimeters on each side. That'd be very easy to do. It wouldn't take very long at all to do the milling. It'd take far longer to set it up to do the work than the actual milling itself, but it'd be very precise. The other way is after I mark them, of course, and I'm going to have to be very diligent about how I go about marking them and get the location right, or rather to figure out how much I need to take off, that 5 millimeter on each side, is probably I'll end up using a Dremel with a milling bit. I'll put this in a vise, soft jaws, and I'll do it by hand. So I'll take a marker and just mark the outside edge of how far I want to come with my Dremel, and just do it by hand. Then on the back side, I will grind off these. This is left over from where they threaded. This is mounted with screws like this that are supposed to go through this tail light piece here, this mounting bracket, rather than the original Suzuki part used. You can see here just very similar screws, but with washers and nuts on the back. I'm going to emulate what Suzuki did, so I'm going to grind this off, and then after I've moved those holes out, 5 millimeter on each side, total of 10 millimeter, I'm just going to put screws through with washers and nuts on the back of this piece right here, like Suzuki originally did, and it will look just like it was original. And then I can use this plate and don't have to modify the taillight bracket, which I do not want to do. So I'm just going to move the holes out. In other words, that's a long conversation about moving these holes out, 5 millimeters on each side, and using the original attaching method that Suzuki used back in the day. Like I said, the taillight itself is a very close match, virtually identical. The new light here did not come with a gasket. This is the original, by the way, gasket right here off of this piece, and I think that I can make that work. It's actually in very good condition. It's clean, reasonably so, soft. Might need to just soften up a little bit and clean it with this cleaner right here, and I think I'll just be able to reuse or use the original gasket right there that came on the OEM part. So I think we'll be back in business. So I'm going to do most of that work off camera. I will show you the finished results. It's pretty straightforward kind of work. Like I said, just moving these out 5 millimeter on each side. And I don't have to tap this because I'm going to use screws with washers and nuts. So that's where I'm at with the wiring. We've talked about the main loom, getting it cleaned up and ready to go back on the bike. Talked about the controls. We'll come back to that later on. We talked about the tail light here, and some rework I've got to do to make this aftermarket part work. And we'll move on now next, I think, to getting the main loom back on the bike itself, getting that in position, and continuing on with some of the assembly on the bike, and maybe I'll touch on this too. And those pieces will probably be the next video that we're going to shoot or talk about. That's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.